You're listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt, where we talk about hunting, shooting, fishing, camping, and everything else that the great outdoors has to offer. Let's get into it.
It's 3 a.m. in Tampa, Florida. Jeffrey Heim is throwing up for the second night in a row. It's from stress. A week ago, the 25-year-old had his head inside of an alligator's jaws while diving for fossilized shark teeth. The alligator attack is not the stress that's causing him to vomit. It's the way social media is covering his ordeal. People are saying that Jeffrey provoked the attack. Jeffrey claims he's innocent and the camera attached to his snorkel mask can prove it, except the alligator tore that off with a large piece of his head a week ago. There are now multiple fossil hunters and others diving the murky Miaka River for a more modern treasure, Jeffrey's camera. Find out what really happened at The Teeth Podcast, streaming now.
All right, guys, I am super excited tonight because I love hearing about animal attacks and close encounters. And you know that from previous podcasts. We kicked off this podcast with an awesome grizzly bear attack. And as I do, you know I love to listen to podcasts as well. I found this one and it is cool. So tonight we have Jeremy Carberry from the Teeth Podcast. Welcome to the show, mate. And you're joining us from all the way over in the US.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mate, where are you in the States?
Right now I'm in California.
Okay. Yep. Good spot there?
Yeah, it's kind of a love-hate relationship, but I think the good outweighs the bad.
Have you ever been down here to Australia?
I have not. No, it's definitely high on my list of places I want to go.
Mate, I always say this. I'm a little confused. I hear from you guys over there that you're worried about Australia because we've got snakes. And I just sit there and go, you guys have got mountain lions, bears, like wolves. Oh, man, give me snakes any day of the week. There's some things you can do that, you're not going to get attacked so much by them. And generally it's if you step on them, and you can wear gaiters and some protection, but you can't just wear a pair of gaiters with a bear or a wolf.
Yeah. It's you fear what you don't understand, right?
Mate, 100%. I think so. Your podcast, I really enjoy it because I've been in the spearfishing and hunting and all these different things. And I love the outdoors and I love nature, and a healthy respect is always something you should have. The one for me was the alligator attack when that bloke was diving.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's one of the probably the most intense story I've heard so far.
It was pretty unique because the fact that he was diving for what was it again? It was
fossilized megalodon shark teeth.
That's right. Yeah. And that's super cool in itself. But then to get attacked by an alligator and everything that happened, man, that's just it just blows my mind. And then you've had some good ones with bull sharks. And what's the inspiration? Where did the podcast idea come from?
Well, nobody was doing anything like this in a podcast format. So I figured, based on that alone, somebody needs to do it. And I'm just so fascinated by animals, especially carnivores and predators. And I just want to learn all about them. Whenever I see a headline, I'm always really disappointed because they don't give enough information about what happened, what the context was. So it just kind of like scratches an itch personally for me to get out there and actually talk to people like, well, what was going on? What was the context? What caused this? And then also, how can I prevent that from happening to me? And then in the podcast, hopefully give people information so they can know what to expect and prepare themselves in these wilderness situations where hopefully they're not making stupid mistakes out there.
Well, it is something that can go wrong really quickly as well. Like I don't think people understand that. And you see it all the time. I love aspects of social media, and I always talk about that, but watching like Instagram and seeing these videos of tourists just standing next to this monster elk or just walking up near a bear to film themselves with it. And I just sit there and just shake my head going, they've either watched one too many documentaries or they really have lived in an absolute shell and have no idea what these animals can actually do to them.
Yeah. Oh, Matt, I was just in Yellowstone for the summer, wilderness guiding out there. And it is mind blowing how dumb some people are. And I try to come at it like from a place of empathy where I'm like, well, maybe they just don't know. But some people are just, they know, they read the signs, they had people tell them, the rangers tell them, and they just don't care. They walk literally right up to a grizzly bear, right up to a moose or an elk. Like these animals are maybe, 5 or 10 times their size. And even if they're herbivores, they can still trample you so easily, especially when they have babies around. Like, I don't know. It's mind blowing how dumb some people are to me.
I'm with you. I think it is a lack of knowledge. I think it's that they've never actually experienced it or been out there. And that's one of the things I like about your podcast is hearing these stories and putting these stories out there for people to understand the reality when something goes wrong. And look, it might be a 1 in a million encounter, but I'm very much like yourself. That first episode where I got Clint on to talk about that grizzly bear attack, I read it and just went, holy crap. Like, who hits a grizzly in the head with an ice pick? I need to know more here. I want to talk to this bloke. And that's literally where it came from. So I had a natural attraction to listen to your podcast. Mate, you're wilderness guide in Yellowstone. That sounds bloody awesome.
Yeah, it was just this past year. I've been wilderness guiding for probably about 7 years. And then this past year was in Yellowstone, a good opportunity. And it was a culture shock though, because I'm sure you guys have similar stuff in Australia, but here in the United States, we're very divided politically and ideologic, whatever that word is. And a lot of the people in the middle of the country, like Wyoming, Montana, where Yellowstone is, they're not very conservation focused. They kind of just care about what's in their backyard. And they have a hard time kind of seeing the bigger picture. So a lot of people, they don't like wolves. They don't like grizzly bears. They don't like bison. Pretty much most of the natural animals that are supposed to be here in this, part of the world, they don't want them there. So there's this battle between the national park system, which is preserving, these animals and preserving their landscape and habitat. And then the people that are locals that, have lived there for a couple of generations and, raise sheep or cattle or whatever it is. So that you feel like you're right in the middle of this battle. It's kind of intense.
We are similar here, in my opinion, because I feel that conservation is a really interesting one. We have so many different perspectives on conservation. We have I actually love, and I talk about it all the time, the North American conservation model there and how the taxes from firearms sales and hunting tags and we have something, I guess, the opposite. We have that we don't want to harm any of our natives to the point where there's way too many on the landscape and they actually can't they get to the point where they're starving. Like kangaroos are in just plague proportions, especially out west. And as we get less and less rain, which happens, we've had a really wet couple of sort of years. As the rain dries up and the feed starts to disappear, I remember a few years ago traveling and going out to the Central West and just seeing starving kangaroos by the hundreds and thousands. Like, it was ridiculous. And they don't want to go down the path of managing the numbers. So I really liked the American model in the sense that the tags go out, which funds more conservation, which I think is just brilliant. But then also it keeps a healthy population. And when you talk about numbers, you need a healthy population because you don't want too many, because then disease can spread. There's so many elements to it. And I think that's a problem here. We are polarized. We have we seem to have the far thoughts of leave all the animals alone and don't interfere at all, and humans shouldn't even be on the landscape, to that we are a part of the landscape. We should be controlling it and managing it properly. And it's just so difficult. Such a difficult conversation.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I also think that, we have a lot of resources now. We have a lot of different countries, or, even within our country, different states that have tried different conservation techniques, have tried different hunting and harvesting techniques. And we can look and say like, oh, well, hey, look, this one seems to make everybody happy. Why don't we try this? I think the state that probably has it the most dialed is probably Alaska here, which, you know a little bit about. And yeah, they seem to really have more of a native approach, like the native peoples that have lived there for thousands of years. It's like you take what you need and you respect the animals and the land in the process, and you don't take more than you need.
I've been there once, and I love the States. I spent a bit of time in New York and went up north, and I'm a massive NFL fan. It's my favorite sport. So I won't say who I go for because they're just never going to do much. But we traveled there. My wife worked there for a few months, and it was just awesome to get over there and go traveling. And Yellowstone is on the list. I went to Niagara Falls, and we drove up there from New York, and we stayed up there, and just beautiful country, beautiful spot, just, amazing. And we went over to Canada as well and went through there. I loved it. I really want to get to Yellowstone. That is on the bucket list because it just looks so majestic and beautiful. But Alaska is also there because that just looks like such a pristine wilderness. It looks amazing.
Yeah, I would put Alaska on the list higher up than Yellowstone personally.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Just because, like, people say Yellowstone is like a miniature version of Alaska. There are some things in Yellowstone that you can't see in Alaska, like all the geysers and the hot pools and stuff like that. But Alaska the scale is just mind blowing. I mean, it's just untouched wilderness, seemingly indefinitely. It just goes on forever. And I love the ocean. And there's more coastline in Alaska than the whole rest of the continental United States combined. It's mind blowing.
Yeah, wow. Is it true? Look, again, being on the other side of the world, it's hard to know. You sort of get spoon-fed media, and especially with algorithms on social media and the like. Is it true that over in Yellowstone, you've got elk and whatnot just hanging around sort of the visitor center, and that they've sort of become accustomed to people?
Yeah, definitely. You see more elk sometimes right next to the road and the visitor center than you would if you went like on a hike in the backcountry. And my theory for that is the bears and the wolves, they're not allowed to come by the visitor centers. They're not allowed to come into the little villages. Like the bear management people will go out and literally, they call it hazing. They'll shoot them with bean bags or shoot them with bear spray and get them out of the area where people are. And elk are smart. They know that. So they know that if they, especially like, cows or moms with their babies, they'll come in where like right in the middle of the village, and then they'll just sit down on the grass and eat grass because they don't have to worry about getting, blindsided by a wolf pack. So you see a lot of like moms and babies, which is actually more dangerous than the wolves and the bears because a mama elk is way more protective and can trample you, is more likely to trample you than you are to get attacked by a bear.
That's interesting. And I agree. Over here, we have introduced deer, and they are pretty well established, but it's to the point that they know where they can't be hunted, essentially. So, they're in the suburbs and they know that they're untouchable and they don't worry. And then if you actually go out into places you can hunt them, they're very sparse and hard to find. And they definitely don't give you much of a chance. They like to hide. So, yeah, I agree. They're very smart animals. And, hey, that's what evolution does. I mean, at the end of the day, they've existed for such a long time and developed that sense of ability to survive. So that's amazing on that part. Mate, you've had a couple of close calls yourself?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Originally, my brother was like, you should just make a podcast where you talk about, times that you've almost been killed. And that was originally the plan. But I feel like people that are almost always getting killed by animals are usually also doing really a lot of really dumb things. Hopefully, that's not the case in my experience. My excuse is that I'm always outside, whether it's spearfishing, diving, wilderness guiding, kayaking, and I'm constantly around a lot of big animals. And sometimes, even though I'm giving them space and respect, hopefully, sometimes there's close calls. So one recently in Yellowstone, if you want to hear a story, I
Yeah.
was, all summer telling people if there's a bison, and bison can get up to about 1,000 pounds. And if there's a bison in the road, don't try to drive around it. Just put your car in park and wait until the bison figures out what it's going to do and gets off the road and then continue on. And if you want to YouTube some funny videos, just YouTube like bison versus vehicle, and you see some, Jim Bob who's driving his big old lifted truck and he's trying to get around the bison to try to like prove who's a bigger man. And the bison just literally indents like right into the truck just with their head and their horns, because as Jim Bob's going around the bison, he doesn't realize there's a baby right there, and the bison's going to get protective. So I always tell everybody, just put your car in park. Well, I was out there with a friend and there was a herd of bison in the road. So we just put our car in park and then something spooked them. It was in the middle of the night, whether it was another bison that was, I call it testosterone poisoning. They're fighting, the males are fighting to try to prove, who's bigger and stronger to mate. Or maybe there was even a pack of wolves out there. They hunt at night, spooking them. And these two bison were running down the road towards my car and they weren't looking at me. They were looking behind them at whatever was chasing them. And one of the bison ran right up onto the front of my vehicle. Unfortunately, didn't go through the glass windshield. It kind of just hit the metal hood and then slid off. But that was definitely terrifying. If that thing would have took one more step, I would have been gone for sure. And my car was in park, so that was kind of a rare occurrence. Usually, if you stop moving, they'll kind of figure out what they're going to do.
Yeah, wow.
But they are giant animals, and in the wrong situation, like when something's chasing them, they're terrifying.
Well, they're just trying to survive, aren't they? They're looking at what they're just trying to get away from whatever's chasing them, and they're probably not even looking ahead, just like run and get out of there.
Yeah, they're not extremely intelligent either. Like, how like if you have two guys in a Wild West bar and they have a problem, they go, okay, let's take this outside. That's not how bison do it. They just, one big male bison sees another one and they start grunting and running at each other. They're trampling babies and females and anything else that's in their way. They just get like very one track mind and forget about anything else.
So you said you do spearfishing, and that's essentially probably the most, I call it aquatic hunting.
Yeah, for sure.
Probably the most I've done out of anything. I love it. And I haven't done it in a while because I got the family going on now, and just, man, I had some close calls with sharks so many times. It just made me think twice about it. And that you had any close calls in the water? Because, man, that's, you think of spearfishing and you honestly have to sit there and go, I have no idea how more people don't get bitten, because so many people, when I was out and about, I'd see them attach their string line or the fish to their hip or their waist belt. And, oh man, like I had a close, well, not really a close call because I was a bit smarter, but I used to run a float line out the back connected to my gun and had probably 20 to 30 meters of rope, and then had a fish spike that you just obviously put the spike through the mouth and out the gill, and it becomes like a T-bar if no one's seen them before, and it holds the fish on. And I remember I was actually diving down for another fish, and I'm going trailing, just about to pull the trigger, and I just get yanked. I nearly had my arm nearly went out of its socket because a shark had hit the fish behind me and tried to take off with it. So in the opposite direction that I was swimming, and man, it was a killer. And I remember sitting there going, what if that was on my hip? Man, I'm in big trouble. So I'm glad that I had the sort of foresight of that. But you just see so many people that just do things that are just asking for trouble. Have you seen much of that over there?
Yeah, unfortunately, not personally, but two of the episodes of the, handful of stories I've got so far were spear fishermen that had their fish on their body. One was a 7-gill shark attack here in California, which is this prehistoric, shark that lives usually about a mile underneath the surface of the ocean. And then the other one was a bull shark in the Florida Keys in the Caribbean. And both of those guys, they had their fish on their hip, and it's risky. There's certain areas of the world where it's more risky than others. I never swim around with a fish on my hip. Usually I'll have a kayak so I could throw it in the hull of the kayak or the float line, which you're talking about. Where I'm fishing, it's pretty shallow water, pretty close to shore. But if there's water, there can be sharks. So yeah, I like to play it safe. I have had some run-ins with sea lions and stingrays and stuff like that. Maybe checked out by some smaller sharks, but nothing, fortunately, never ended up in the mouth of anything out there.
Right, that's a win because I sort of see the ocean as you're definitely in their territory. And I don't know about you, but I'm not the most, I'm not the most graceful in the water when you're out there with the big flippers on and the gun and whatnot. And you just sit there and go, if you are going to get hammered, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
And then even from like further to that, you talk about first aid perspectives and being in water, your body can't, your blood just keeps coming out because it's not going to be able to coagulate and stop the bleeding occurring. So even a small injury is going to be amplified. So it's pretty interesting, but it's so much fun. I love being in the water and seeing the fish that's around and just even the different life. But everything can be dangerous. I mean, look at what happened to Steve Irwin and the stingray that took his life. No one would have ever expected the stingray would have been the one that, was the end of Steve Irwin. And it's crazy to think, but it can just happen. And, you can't live your life in fear, but you do have to think about what are precautions to be as safe as possible, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Steve Irwin because here in the States, and especially like the people I work with as wilderness guides, we all immortalize Steve Irwin. We love him so much. We talk about him all the time. Even though he's been gone for years, his impact, across an ocean has been so strong. I don't know if you've seen it. There's this YouTube video where they kind of like took all these things that he said and made it into a song. It's like, I'm on top of the world. I'll send you the link. It's incredible. But we call it the morale booster. If we had like a tough night or a little bit out of it, we blast that song and everybody's high-fiving and singing along. And yeah, there's just something about that guy. He's just such a positive force and just cared so much about animals. I imagine he has that same effect down there in Australia, right?
He was very popular down here. And I think he actually was more popular over there, only because probably just the sheer numbers. I mean, you guys are way bigger in population than we are. We're not even 10% of you guys. So it's a big population difference. But no, he had a lot of energy. And I was lucky enough to meet his father. I used to, be sort of around people into the reptile scene and whatnot. I'm just fascinated with animals and I love reptiles and always have. And that's just, I was lucky enough that knew a couple of people and got to experience some pretty cool stuff in that and was taken up to meet Bob. So that was, a really cool experience. But mate, actually, you will like this one because speaking of reptiles, I don't know if I've told it on the podcast. I think I have, but I can't remember, so I'll tell this one anyway. We were out in the Central West, out near a place called Burke, and I know you might not know that, but a few people down here that listen probably do. And we were driving along, and we saw a lace monitor, probably about a 6-foot goanna, and I'm 6 foot, just on 6 foot. So the thing was as long as me, and I was with my brother, and it was caught up in a fence. So, being the people that love animals, I just went, hey, I'm going to help this thing out. And you got to watch them tricky because they love a tail whip. They've got these monster claws, and they've also got this massive mouth on them with plenty of teeth, and they can do a lot of damage if you do get bitten. And to give you an example of that, I had a mate that had a 3.5 foot, same species, and he got bitten by his 3.5 foot. It was a pet, and he ended up with 38 stitches.
Whoa!
And this thing's 6 foot. It's not a pet. This other one was like handled as a pet. It was friendly as hell. This thing was not. So as soon as we approached it, it was going crazy, but it was stuck. So the only way what we could do is I had to grab its head, and my brother grabbed the base of its tail. So if you grab the base of its tail up near the back legs, the legs can't scratch you, because that's a concern. If you have it a bit lower down, the legs actually grab and can do some damage because the claws can get you. So I've grabbed the head. He's grabbed the tail, the base of the tail. And I don't know how it happened, but somehow I've ended up I do know how it happened. This thing has made the noise they do when they, do a shit. And out there, they eat carrion. They are eating like rotting pig, you name it. It's not nice. And I remember it made this noise, and my brother decided he didn't want a bar of that and just let it go. So I'm standing there with the goanna's head, because by this stage we just unwrapped it, lifted it up, and it's because you want to put it on a tree because it's going to go up rather than just drop it, because it's more likely to come back at you. And so I'm holding this thing, and it has just sprayed me full, like it had diarrhea, and has covered me in like my, from my chest all the way down my legs. I look like, you remember Steve Irwin when he was jumping in the mud?
Yeah.
It looks like that, but the mud was like Lace Monitor poo, and it reeked. And I still remember it was as funny as all hell, because I immediately just stripped down and just trying to scrub it off with my clothes. And I remember this car, it must have been a bunch of miners driving past, and I'm standing in the middle of the road just in my underwear because I was getting rid of the smell was just, it was vile. But hey, that Lace Monitor got to see another day, and it's a funny story on the back of it. But thanks to my brother, I appreciate that one.
So tell me a little bit more about this animal. And it's essentially a big lizard, right?
Mate, they are. My memory's not. It's Varanus. What is? I can't think of what Lace Monitor is. It's not Gouldy. That's a sand monitor. I'm not. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But if you type in Lace Monitor,
if nobody's seen one before, just describe it for me.
Okay, so it is like this Komodo dragging looking thing. If you've seen them, it's just a big, bulky. Even the way they walk, but they are beautiful. There's two different types. There's a bell face, and the bell face has these big, thick bands, like a bright yellow and then like a black, and that's across their whole body, right down their tail. They have a really long tail. The tail's nearly as long as the rest of their body, and they have like an elongated head that sort of, would probably be 15 centimeters. I'm not sure what that is in inches over there for you, but massive head, massive amount of teeth on them. They are massive claws. They can climb up trees, and that's what they generally do to get away from predators. They just fly, and they fly up them really quick, super speedy. And the teeth on them are just designed to rip apart rotting flesh and anything dead, and they'll take it apart. Absolutely beautiful. The standard Lace Monitor is more like it's speckled, so it doesn't have the bands, but it's like this really beautiful speckle of black and yellow in essence. And then their tails are usually banded, like a thick band that goes down them. Beautiful animal, like most of the goannas we have out here. There's some really pretty colors and some beautiful looking ones.
Do they have teeth like a shark would have teeth, or is it more of just like the real sharp inside of the mouth?
Just the real sharp ones. Real, like they're I'm probably going to say about a centimeter long, but real sharp and pointy. And
Oh, okay.
they are designed to if they grab on, they're holding and you're not getting out. Like, so like teeth. I'm telling all these stories because I know you like this stuff.
Yeah.
I used to keep reptiles obviously as well. And I had this 8-foot diamond python and this thing was just beautiful, right? Black. They have these rosettes, bright yellow, gorgeous animal, 8 foot. So big girl. She was the most placid thing. I'd had her for years and years and never even looked like biting. Like it was the go-to python. If anyone came over, they were a little bit scared of snakes. It was the one I trusted without a doubt. And I stuffed up this day. I was feeding, which obviously, feeding him rats and mice. And I mustn't have washed my hands well enough. And as I've put my hand in, I should have known, but she was just acting a little bit weird when I opened the cage. Didn't really think about it because she was such a good snake. And she nailed me. Just bang, grabbed it. And our pythons, they've got like this backwards curved teeth. So when they grab prey and they wrap, and that's what she did to me, you can't just pull your hand out. You've actually sort of got to push it a little bit further in to then try and move the teeth out and get it out, or just wait for them to work out, oh, that's not the prey that I want. And hopefully they let you go. And look, I was lucky. I just sort of just went, oh, geez, I've stuffed up here. Pretty painful, but just sort of took it. She'd wrapped around and just stopped moving for a bit. And she ended up probably about 10 minutes later, just deciding this isn't what I thought it was and just let go. But man, there was some blood. Like my arm was just red. I'm wearing a red shirt now. It was probably about the same, but it was covered in it. But that was my stuff up. And I think a lot of times with animals that is probably part of the issue. So
she was held on you for 10 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, that wasn't fun. That was definitely not fun.
What's going through your mind? Like you're just trying to be patient and wait it out, and not pulling away just makes it worse.
If you pull away, the cut opens right up. And I was sitting there going, 8 foot, decent size animal and decent teeth. I wasn't in any sort of danger because she hadn't wrapped anywhere around my neck or anything like that. I had a mate that happened to, and it was luckily he was handling with someone else, and they were able to unwrap him. But I always sort of had that rule, especially the bigger ones, that I wouldn't handle on my own for that reason, unless I was confident that if they did wrap, I can unwrap them because, once they get a grip, they're pretty full on. Yeah, it was just sit and wait it out. I've heard stories that you put them under water and they'll eventually let go, but I'm not 100% sure. I never tried that. So I just went, wait, look, just take it. And it was your stuff up. And yeah, this is the consequence of your stuff up, mate.
I mean, 8-foot python, you're not going to get that thing in water very easy.
Well, when they wrap, you'd be surprised at how small they get into. When they wrap up, even when you would be really shocked at the small spots they coil up into, and they can just perch or like hide. You would have no idea. Like you're talking, some of them, they can get into a space. Like some of mine would go down. My 8 foot, she probably got to a space that would be no more than maybe 3/4 of a foot for you, which I think is probably about 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters because they lap on top of each other as well.
Yeah.
So you'd be quite shocked. They sort of tally up, but yeah, no, mate, such a bloody brilliant creature. And that same snake, I have to tell this one, mate. My dad has a fear of snakes, petrified. Hated the fact that when we were teenagers in school that's what we were into snakes and lizards. And she got out one day. So like probably the worst one because she's the biggest. And my old man, we used to keep him in the garage, and my old man has come out and he's looking down on the floor because he had a shelf where he kept all his car cleaning products, and they were all on the ground, and he's just going, what the hell's going on here? So he's bent down to pick them up, and as he's come back up to put them back on the shelf, she had actually been on the shelf and she dropped down just to see him. So he sort of obviously bending over. He's come back up. He's probably about halfway standing up and her head's in his face. Oh, man. I was grounded for a little bit for that.
Yeah, my dad hated snakes too, and I loved them. We were not allowed to have them under the roof. We could keep them outside in a box or, something. But yeah, they were not allowed to be in the house. Obviously, we still brought them in the house because we don't, kids.
Yeah, I feel you. So let's get back to any animal attacks that you've sort of had or some pain that you've sort of felt from animals. Have you encountered anything that really just sticks in your mind as something super painful?
The most painful was stingray. Here in California, they're called round stingrays, and they're generally not that bad. Like sometimes people will get stung and they don't even realize it, and then other times the people freak out. But I got stung once where the barb got lodged in my ankle. It was a barb, about the size of like a small pencil. And that one, believe it or not, like it's felt like a bee sting or a hornet sting. It hurt at first, but then the adrenaline kind of took over and it wasn't too bad. And then a couple months later, I got stung again. And the fleshy part of the bottom of my foot went all up inside there. And that was the most pain I've ever felt in my whole life. It was really bad. It kind of taught me a little bit about empathy, that, everybody kind of has different experiences, and you can get stung by a stingray, but depending on how much venom is on the sheath that the barb is in, and then depending on, how recently it stung someone, you can have a completely different experience. So you can, like, sometimes people are drama queens where they'll get stung and they act like they're going to die. But the second one that I got, I didn't think I was going to die, but I kind of wish that I would die because it hurt so bad.
It's really interesting. One of the last trips out hunting, probably nearly stepped on a red belly black snake, only maybe 10 centimeters away from it. And it takes me back to my brother. He got bitten by one, and it was essentially didn't really do too much, to be honest. We've got, everyone really fears red belly black snakes over here, and the reality is they're not that venomous. They, if you've got a heart condition or you're a young, like a small child, then you're in a bit of trouble. But for an adult, most of the time it's, and look, I'm no doctor, obviously, but most of the time they're pretty good. You still go and seek advice. So he went to hospital and they literally did nothing for him. They gave him some Panadol and just monitored to see if it got worse. And he's a bit crook for, vomiting and headaches and the like. But after that, he was fine. He was in there for 24 hours and then out. Now, we do have some other ones that are pretty crazy that are a lot worse. And a lot of the time people getting bitten over here with snakes is more that it's a case of misidentification.
Oh, okay.
And there's like, I've told it before on my podcast, in the sense that the death adder is a real fat, sort of wide snake and real stocky and short. But for the untrained person that's not sure about reptiles, they're very similar to a common skink, which we call like a blue-tongue lizard over here.
Mm-hmm.
So people can confuse them quite easily. And it actually happened at a place called Wiseman's Ferry, where just a person thought it was a lizard, ended up grabbing it. And mate, they death adders have, I think it's the quickest strike in the world, or the second quickest, and they can also come up vertically. So a lot of people, when they come in from the top to grab them, they can actually go up. And I had a mate who was not a professional keeper, but he was a breeder, and he got bit by his death adder, and within 5 seconds was convulsing on the floor. He was really crook from it. It just had a reaction and went crazy with him, and lucky he survived it. But he was again lucky someone else was there, did first aid, called up. He was very lucky. But it's one of those things, and I just find some people just love them so much. There was a dead set guru of snakes, a guy called Bob Whitty over here. And the last time I spoke with him, he was telling me he had 88 lethal bites. used to have like taipans, coastal taipans, and he'd free handle them, just have them draped around his neck. And like, that's one of the world's most venomous snakes. And you're just like, oh, I never did anything like that because I was just like, that's just insane to me. And he was that bad that he could not walk past a horse or be close to a horse because the antivenin is actually comes out of horses. He'd break into hives. He'd had so much of it. And he was
Wow.
he was a regular down at the old Gosford Hospital. But yeah, it's
That anti-venom is real expensive too, right?
look, our health system's a little different over here to yours. So
Yeah.
that's it's sort of everybody chips in our taxes and
Okay.
emergencies free. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so it's not rare antivenom. It's costly because it is hard to make and things like that, but it's not super, super rare. They don't have heaps of it, but you generally, most of your major hospitals would have enough to, like, hopefully save your life.
Okay. Wow.
It's, yeah, some interesting people I've met over the years and just what they do. And it's cool though. Like sometimes I go, I would never do something like that. But hey, if that floats your boat and, it's not affecting anyone else, all power to you.
Yeah. Wow.
So what other things you had, mate? You had any other close encounters other than the ones we spoke about?
Yeah. I'll give you a recent one in Yellowstone. I kind of got obsessed with grizzly bears and trying to find them and photograph them. And
now you're talking my language.
Okay.
Oh, I love a bear story.
Okay. So I'd never seen a grizzly bear before. I've traveled to Alaska. I've been in a lot of different, grizzly bear habitat. And for some reason, it's just, I would get there in the afternoon. Oh yeah, there was one in the morning. Or I'd get there in the morning and there's one here last night. But then, I just always missed them. And so I was working in Yellowstone. I figured, if I'm working here for like 3 or 4 months, I got a lot better chance of seeing some of these animals that I've really wanted to see. And I would, drive around early in the morning and then like around sunset. That's when they're the most active. A lot of those bears, they have their fur is so thick that when it's midday and the sun's out, it's like, wearing us wearing like 4 winter coats in the sun. We'd be like sweating and exhausted. So whenever the sun's out, they're kind of in the shade, just napping, and then they'll get real active in the morning and the evening. So I drive around a lot, and usually you drive around, you don't see anything. But this one day there was a bear on the side of the road about, I guess it would be like less than 100 meters from the road, right? The limit is about 100 meters. Once a bear gets closer than 100 meters to a village or a road or whatever, bear management people show up and they kind of get them away. And it's for the bear's safety and for people's safety. So there's this bear just within that, a little bit too close to the road. And she's eating these berries and just minding her own business. And all these people are pulled off on the side of the road taking pictures and stuff. She's got her head down in the bush. I'm trying to get pictures of her, but her head's down in the bush eating the berries. So you kind of just see this like furry brown blob. So I'm kind of like hoping she looks up so I can get a good picture. And a National Park Service truck shows up on the road, pulls over, and from her perspective, she couldn't see that was a National Park Service truck. It's a pickup truck. Like, everybody in Wyoming is driving pickup trucks. But she either heard that, like the engine of that specific individual truck, or she smelled that individual truck or the, bear management guy. And she just looks right up in that direction. It was kind of crazy. And they have really, really good, smell and hearing. So sure enough, he walks across the street and then kind of looks down into the valley area where she was. And she just holds eye contact with him and looks guilty. She knows she's too close to the road, but she doesn't care. And then she just starts eating the berries even faster. And so he's yelling, "Get out of here, bear. You're not supposed to be here." And she's ignoring him. So then he pulls out, it looks like a big shotgun, but it's just like a flashbang. It shoots this up in the air and makes a big loud bang. So he shoots that off. It makes a big bang and she runs off. And then it was like as soon as that happens, somebody's like, there's a mama and two cubs up the road. So everybody drives up the road. Sure enough, there's a mama and two cubs over there. And in this one evening, I think I saw about 6 or 7 grizzly bears in that area because all these berries were blooming, so they were just kind of all over. So I was just walking with my camera alongside the main road. And then after it all kind of died down, like an hour and a half later, I'm walking back down to my car with this other guy, kind of recapping, like, did you see this one? Did you see that happen? And we're just laughing about all these stories. And then he was telling me about all these other bears. And I was like, that was tonight. And I'm like putting it in my head, like, that's like over 10 bears that were within like a mile or two. And then I kind of had like a mental map, like, well, that one ran that way. The mom and the two cubs ran that way. But then like what he's telling me, there might even still be bears around. So he got in his car and I'm still walking. And then right out of the bush in front of me, maybe 10 meters, this grizzly bear walks right out into the road in front of me. And you're always supposed to have bear spray. And I preach this, you always have bear spray on you no matter what. And I almost always had it on me. But when I got out of the car, it must have fell out of my pocket. And I was in such a hurry to grab my camera and get some photos, And so this bear walks right out into the road in front of me. And I reach for my bear spray. It's not there. And that bear just looks right at me. And then it looks the other way and then just crosses the road just like casually as can be, And there's this big cliff on the other side that goes like straight up. And I'm thinking like, what are you doing, bear? You're just walking up to a cliff. That bear went straight up the side of the cliff like an expert rock climber, just no problem. And that was probably my favorite bear experience in Yellowstone this summer. It was pretty amazing just to like be that close to them and get photos. And then, people do get killed by those grizzly bears, and they're definitely big enough. Like the big ones, they look like a vehicle, they're massive, but they know that humans are trouble. They know that they're not supposed to be interacting with humans, and they really try to avoid us, not because they're like afraid of us, but they know that we have guns and cars and can, take them out. So there was a woman that was killed this past year just outside of Yellowstone National Park. And the trailhead is Buttermilk Trail. On the trailhead, there's a sign that says, be careful. Be bear aware, don't go running. If you run, that can trigger their predatory response. You want to be hiking with other people. The more people you have, the more noise you make, the more the bears can hear you coming. You don't want to be silently, going down these trails. And you want to be very careful early in the morning and late at night, because that's when the bears are really active, and always have bear spray with you. So this woman was running, exercise running by herself first thing in the morning at dawn with no bear spray. She probably turned a corner and just spooked this mama grizzly bear, and the mama grizzly bear, sees some unidentified object running towards her babies. She's going to respond. And unfortunately, that woman got killed, but she was also literally ignoring every single thing that you're supposed to do in bear country, and kind of an interesting story, because after the mama grizzly bear killed that woman that was running, she didn't eat the corpse and the babies didn't eat the body. They just split. They got out of there right away, probably because they know that they're not supposed to be around people. She was like, okay, well, that was a instinct response. And they go, we got to get out of here. And not only did they get out of that area right there, they got way out of the area, because Montana Fish and Wildlife showed up, and then they set traps to try to find the grizzly bears that killed that woman. And to this day, they haven't been able to find those bears, because if they're like fugitives, they just took off and ran away. They knew they were in trouble.
Animals fascinate me. Like it's funny because as this is a hunting and outdoors podcast, and a lot of people miss that hunters are conservationists and love animals. And, I don't understand that side of it. I get that if you've never done something, it's hard to understand that. But, animals just fascinate me. They're just such amazing creatures that, like I've been trying to get a deer and just, plugging away at that. And they are such a brilliant just animal, the smell and the eyesight and just they're hearing everything that they have at their disposal to, get away from predators. We've got a sambar deer over here that it evolved around tigers. So those things are just super edgy and smart because they had to be, because they literally were stalked by tigers. And yeah, it doesn't matter what animal you talk about. They're just so awesome. I remember one of the dumber things I've done in my life. There's been a few, mind you, but one of the dumber ones was we were spearfishing down at a place called Kyola, which is down the south coast. And we were in the water knowing full well that there was great whites around, because around the next headland, a whale had died. So they were eating the whale. So we just figured, yeah, sweet, we'll be good. And luckily we didn't even see one, because I'm guessing they were just eating away there. But it makes me think, because the same bloke I was diving with, he had a real close encounter. They were out spearing up in Newcastle. And he was just down, and a great white just came straight at him, got to about 3 meters and just veered off. And I was like, man, when he rang me to tell me the story, I was, oh my God. Like, I don't even know what I would do in that sense. Like, those things are monsters. Like, I've had a couple of close calls with sharks, like seeing them around and whatnot, but they're small compared to a great white. When I was asking him, I was just like, man, what were you feeling? His brother jumped out of the water so quick. It was almost like it was running on water, a reincarnation of Jesus. But yeah, it was, man, I have this fascination with animals and animal attacks, that's for sure. And it's I mean, maybe it's unhealthy, but it's so much fun.
Yeah, I would argue the opposite. I think it's healthy. I think that's not a coincidence, and it's universal. It's not just you and me. Everybody, whether it comes from fear, fascination, or a combination of the both. And that's how we've evolved as a species. That's how we've been able to survive, is by being fascinated by the things that are dangerous, like animals that are way bigger than us and potentially, lethal to us. The more we understand them, the healthier we are. You right?
I love thinking about ancestors and what they faced, like the tribe, the tribal people. Like, we have our Aboriginal population. I'm Aboriginal, and I think about my ancestors that were on the land, and they were hunting with primitive sort of tools, and even, I love hearing about that, because I just sit there and go, man, they must have been so in tune with nature and so good to be able to just read everything and live a part of them constantly and survive around all these different animals that must have been looking at them as prey. Like, if you got a grizzly bear and you've got a human out on the landscape, at some stage they got to be thinking, like, not so much now because we've evolved so much in technology and, cars and all that. But at some stage, if you had, them on a horse, bears have got to be sitting there going, what's that? It looks like a food source to me, and I just love just thinking about how hard they would have had that. And even, crossing Australia or, crossing the US and discovering all these new places and, uncharted terrain. And that's what sort of got me into hunting. Like, I've always loved the outdoors, and I've been into hiking my whole life and camping. And I sort of went, well, hiking with a rifle is basically a form of hunting. And that's what got me out there and going to places where a bit off the trail, and finding these undiscovered parts that maybe no one ever has been before. That's so fascinating. I love that stuff. So have you done much hiking over there? Because there looks like, like the Appalachian Trail, and there's so many good places over there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We've got some really beautiful areas. Yeah. And I agree 100% about the, whether it's hunting or spearfishing or hiking, it's really just, if it gets you out in nature and it gets you focused on the natural rhythm, it goes down to the core of our being, and it just connects us, and I feel so whole, I feel alive, and it's so healthy. I've done pieces of the Appalachian Trail over on the East Coast. Really beautiful. Rains a lot over there though. And I've done sections of the Pacific Coast Trail, the PCT, over here on the West Coast, and goes pretty much from Mexico up to Canada. And then there's another really popular trail that goes right down the middle of the country. It goes through Yellowstone. So I've never completed any of them, but I've done sections of them for like a week, of backpacking, and some of the best times I've ever had. You're just exactly what you're saying. You're seeing these areas that along the trail, obviously other people have seen them. But if you take a side trail or you go off and explore, you at least you feel like you're the first person that's ever even been in that area, and it's really magical.
So talking about like hike through or, multi-day hikes, that one for me has always been an interesting one because I look at you guys over there and go, man, I would most definitely want to have some sort of sidearm walking around with bears and wolves and camping in it. Like, that's not a very protective tent that you've got there from some of the predators you guys have. It's not like that over here. Like over here, your probably biggest threat is probably another person. It's very, very different over here in that sense. I can't believe how many people do hike over there. It is something that I just sort of go, wow, like you are putting yourself right bang smack in the middle with so many, chances. And I get that you may never even see one, but just, you are at the mercy of nature, and it can be a beautiful thing, but it can also be a bloody dangerous thing.
Yeah, and you hear about the people that are getting killed. That's what makes the headlines. But for every time, somebody gets killed on a trail or out in nature, there's literally millions more that are, coexisting completely peacefully and fine. And there are a lot of safety things that you can do to bring your chances of having a bad animal encounter way, way down, and the main ones are just really common sense, just if you're hiking with a partner or preferably even like three people, you're talking, all of the animals that can potentially hurt you are going to avoid you if they hear you, like they're not hunting us. Whenever there's interactions, it's usually a misunderstanding. You got in between them and their babies or them and their food. So if you're making noise, especially when you're like about to turn a corner and you don't know what's on the other side of the corner, even if you're alone, clap your hands, sing a song, make noise, don't be just silently turning corners and not knowing what's on the other side. And if you just do those basic things, carry bear spray. Bear spray not only works on bears, it works on moose, elk, mountain lions. It's essentially pepper spray. They get that in their noses and their eyes. They're going the other direction. So, carry bear spray, make noise, be aware of your surroundings, talk to rangers before you start hiking. What's going on? What has been, what are some safety concerns I need to be aware of? Just educate yourself and be aware, and your chances of having a bad encounter go way down. It's kind of interesting. Some of the people I talked to, this guy down in the Caribbean, his name's Jason. He's a professional spear fisherman. And, he's been attacked by a couple different sharks. The one that I got was this bull shark that attacked him 100 feet under the surface of the oceans, and you can't just shoot up from 100 feet. You get the bends. Wish he did. But, after I talked with him, I said like, well, what do you, after being attacked by this shark and almost dying, like, what do you think of being out in the wilderness? And he said, if there wasn't dangerous things, it wouldn't be as cool. So I thought that was kind of a funny response, but these big animals kind of is what makes the wilderness so special, is that we're not the biggest thing. We're not the most powerful thing out there.
I would completely agree in the sense that it does add that extra element, and that if everybody did it, it wouldn't be as special. And I'm all for that, especially whether it be just being out there hiking, camping, fishing, spearfishing, it doesn't matter. The more you get out in nature, the better you're going to be, and the better experiences you're going to have in this life. And that's a win for everybody. It is definitely on my list to get over to the US more and do some cool stuff, because I've got plenty on the bucket list getting over there, and I'm dying to hear the elk bugle in person.
Oh,
That just,
man.
oh man, it sounds good.
Yeah.
That and a turkey gobbling.
My last day in Yellowstone, they start the bugling around September. That's their, mating season. And I'd been like, talking to people like, where is it happening? And I would show up at this valley and you'd see a big, bull elk come out of the woods like a mile away and be like, is he going to bugle? Is he going to, he just walks back in the woods. Big disappointment. So the last day I was in Yellowstone, I had heard that there was a couple of big bull elk bugling at each other by this trailhead, like real popular trailhead with lots of people around. So I drove over there, and even before I got out of the car, I could hear it. And then I got out of my car, and it just like, it rattles your bones. It's incredible. And then about a half a mile away, there was another bull elk, and then it responded, and you just hear it echoing through the canyon, and they're both sitting down in the shade because it was like a sunny day, So they're like, yelling at each other, like, I'm going to kick your butt. These are my females. And then you hear them respond back, yeah, why don't you come over here? I'll kick your butt. But like, they're just both sitting in the shade and relaxing. It's pretty funny.
But this year was the first one I hunted the rut, but for ours, it was a fallow deer.
Yeah.
So it was the first year that I was camping, and it was amazing because you're hearing, they make a croaking sound and you're just hearing their croaks all around you. And then, I was trying to get one. Obviously, that's the point of hunting. And I was sneaking down on one, and it actually just came running past. It was chasing 3 does and croaking. So it came past me at about 7 meters. And it was such a fantastic experience, that noise and just seeing it croak from so close. It had no idea I was there. Something I'll always remember. And it was such a cool memory. I'm hooked. I love that noise. I was like, I've got to get back there next time. That was so good. So I can't imagine what an elk would sound like, because fallow are quite a small deer. Out of all the deer, they're quite like, you'd call them probably petite. But, compared with an elk, oh man, that's right up on the bucket list. That's for sure. So I'm envious that you got to hear that. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's worth it if you get a chance. Definitely worth it. They say that if you're not in a national park, if you're in like a national forest or somewhere where there's hunting allowed, if you're out there during the rut and you hear an elk bugle, chances are it's not an elk. That's a hunter calling.
Trying to call one in.
And they said a lot of times you'll have one hunter, he'll bugle, and then he'll hear a response, and then he'll go and get closer to the elk, to try to. And then once he gets up to him, it turns out it's just another hunter. They're bugling at each other.
Mate, I'm sure it's happened over here plenty of times, and I do like the rule over there. Like, I know here you've got to wear blaze orange, or in the state that I'm in, you have to when you're out hunting on public land. So do everything you can so people don't shoot each other. And I know it's some of your states you guys have that in, but I can definitely see that happening because you're there to hunt them, and you'd be calling to try and attract one and attract a hunter. It's pretty. I wonder how much that might happen actually sometimes.
Yeah, apparently the way that you can really tell is after the real loud bugle that goes like woo. There's like this little like chuckle. It's like whoo, 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 whoo. And people can't really reproduce that chuckle sound. So if you listen real close, you can. That's how you tell if it's a person or an actual elk.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. Good to know. Good to know if I ever get over there in during the rut for the elk. But mate, I really appreciate you coming on. I know it's late over there, so I am very thankful for you giving up your time. For people, I've already binged your podcast. I can't wait for the next episode. I will say that. So can tell people about the podcast, where they can find you, and
Yeah, thanks so much. The podcast is called The Teeth Podcast. And it's on all the places where you'd listen to podcasts. I see analytics, so I can see like who's listening, and a lot of the Australians listeners gravitate towards the bull shark episode because that's an animal that you guys obviously have over there. And so Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere. My name's Jeremy Carberry. I'm the host, and Season 2 is going to be coming out next year, 2024. We've got some really, really crazy episodes coming out with really fascinating things. Box jelly sting survivor. that actually happen in Hawaii, but I know you guys have more of them there than
Yeah, we have a lot up north.
yeah, we have here. And yeah, thank you so much for all the support. And I always give the feet and the meters, so international listeners aren't lost with the descriptions.
Mate, that is one thing I do like about the podcast is your commentary between the actual interviews. So it's mate, I am a fan. I do like it. So as I said, I binged it straight up. I listened to the first and went, these are cool. I'm gonna go right through them. And yeah, the bull one, it resonates with me. I'm especially I grew up doing a lot of water skiing as well as same as my wife. And there's been a couple of times we've been bumped in the water by something, and I do think it was probably a bull shark.
Oh, wow.
But I got one final one for you because this just sums me up as a human. Talking of jellyfish, I was out with the wife and her parents used to have quite a large boat, and like you could sleep on it and basically camping on the water. And we were out there one time and there was just a million jellyfish in this lake. And they were like these big clear ones with a little bit of brown underneath. And I was like, they're always there. And I ski around them. I wonder if they sting you. And I had to, just curiosity, they say curiosity killed the cat. And curiosity definitely got Matt, because I grabbed one and oh my God, got just like a million little electric shocks going on. And it happened for about a good couple of hours. It was, but you know what? I just had to do it. It's again, just fascination with animals. And what do you do? It's like that show. It's got an Aussie fella and one of you guys over there. And they just go around on the scale of pain. I think it's called the Pain Kings or Kings of Pain, it might be. Love it. I love it. I just listen to that and watch that, and man, it's cool because it's probably something I'd do.
Oh, those guys are sick.
But, all right, mate, I've had a blast. Thank you very much for giving up your time. If you haven't checked it out and you do want to hear about some animal attacks like I'm a big fan of, that if you listen to the podcast, go and check out the Teeth podcast. Jeremy Carberry, thank you very much for coming on. And listeners, bye for now. If you have a topic, guest, question, or any gear that you want to hear about on the podcast, shoot us an email, australianhuntingandbeyond@gmail.com. Alternatively, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All the links are in the show notes. If you haven't already, make sure you give us a review and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.